We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AV Rant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Did you know that using an electric razor, you can still nick yourself?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I went a little fast.
Sorry, Rob. Didn't mean to rush you. Didn't know you had to shave the dome piece.
That's right.
In order to be on this podcast. I did the same thing. I was like, I asked you if you could be ready in 10 minutes.
Yep.
And I was like, I hope he says no, because I can't either. I had nothing set up at all. I like literally looked at it and went, you know what? If we do it right now, we could be done by around noon, and then
That's
I can
right.
get the rest of my day over with. So
Yes.
I had just gotten done. I'm sitting on my cable. What is going on?
I was wondering if you were scratching the back of your neck.
No.
Again. I'm like, there's no way you got another haircut that early.
Yeah. No. So they canceled Iron Fist, which I think is no surprise to anybody, even though the second season was much better.
Right,
And
yeah.
they canceled Luke Cage.
They did, yeah. Which makes you wonder, either Disney's taking things back for their own streaming service, or they're just going, hey, we canceled these two, but we're bringing out Heroes for Hire. Because that's also possible.
What I've heard too, but I kind of liked, I think that probably my favorite episodes in, I always want to call him Power Man, Luke Cage, was when Iron Fist was there and they were both fighting together. That was kind of cool. It's kind of some of my favorite parts of that show. And I didn't really love the second season of Luke Cage all that much. I didn't like the first season of Luke Cage. I think I finished it, but I know I didn't finish it twice. So I started watching Daredevil season 3, which just came out. So
I'm so far behind. They brought out way too many of these too quickly for me.
2 episodes. 2 episodes of that so far. So since at the basically, if those of you that spoilers, I guess, the end of the Defenders, they dropped a building on him. We're already getting through I hope we're getting through the episodes where I'm in recovery, therefore I can't be
I see.
super awesome.
Do all of those up front instead of having him injured halfway through the season and out of commission for 3 episodes.
It's not quite that bad. I mean, they did the training montage in the first episode.
Okay,
so,
right.
But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. I do like Daredevil. I love that they got rid of that stupid costume. I hated the costume.
Well, all I know is
so
Fisk is back, so that's
and he's
that's
fantastic.
Important.
He's
the main
fantastic
thing.
so far. He's
All
fantastic so far. All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. YouTube.com/avrant, where you can see us but not talk to us because we won't talk back to you. Contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. My voice is still kind of shot from this weekend. We had 2 big events this weekend. I was at the same. So Friday night we had the climbing wall at my kids' school for trunk or treat. I did that for free because whatever, but it was 2 hours of insanity. It was insane. And then we went to the St. Pete Science Fest, which had like 10,000 people there or something like that. It was insane. So we ended up with
But hey, those are potential future customers. So
I know 10 to 4 we were there, and we estimated there was maybe a grand total during that 6 hours of maybe 10 minutes where we had a single rope free on my 4-person climbing wall. Like they had a line the entire time.
Well, that's fantastic.
Never happened. Yeah. Unfortunately, I get paid free those 2 events, but whatever.
No, but I mean, well, hey, that's good word of mouth. Yeah. It's a lot better than like sitting around at home with 0 calls whatsoever.
And I've already gotten the call, and I don't know that it came from either of those 2 things, but I did get a call yesterday that was, I think, related to an event I did a couple of weeks ago. So, it comes around.
Well, Fearless Mobile Climbing, if you're in Florida and want to check it out and want to hire
There
Tom.
you go. Yeah. 3-story tall mobile climbing wall. Straight to you. Then you get to meet me.
That's
so
right.
You'll have a hard time talking to me about AV if I have a bunch of kids to deal with, because it's usually what it ends up with. That being said, it's also for adults. Adults can climb as well. All right. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. So we're going to start with Lemuel and Chad. They went to www.avrent.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. There, they left us a PayPal donation, which PayPal takes all their credit card information or their PayPal information if they have a PayPal account, and sends us over the lion's share of that money. So thank you, Lemuel, and thank you, Chad.
Yeah, Lemuel, Chad, thank you very much for those donations.
We also want to thank our 74 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up and they will take a monthly stipend out of your account and give it to your content creators of choice. The minimum is $1 and the maximum is infinity. So all we need is one infinity and we're good. But until then, we will take the dollars. And we have currently 74 patrons. So thank you to our patrons.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRantPodcast if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation to us. And thanks so much to our 74 patrons over there.
And if you can support the podcast in a different way, all you have to do is let us know what you did to support the podcast, and we'll mention you. So Lemuel supported the podcast again by buying four Focal little birds. When you put the word "four" and Focal right next to each other, I like my eyes bounce between them. Like, which one am I supposed to read?
FO.
The 4 Focal little birds and 2 super birds with stands from Accessories for Less to expand his 5.1 Focal setup into a 7.1.4 configuration. He made sure to mention us as well. So thank you again, Lemuel.
Yeah, thanks very much for talking us up to Accessories for Less, Lemuel, and congrats on that purchase. I hope you enjoy those.
I feel like a creaking door. Like my voice is just,
Vocal fry.
That's exactly right. I do feel like that. I hate vocal fry. I mean, it's when you can't control, there's nothing you do, but people who do it on purpose, that's really irritating. And they don't. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. All right, in the news, Vizio and TCL have responded to the current situation where Dolby Vision on the Xbox One S or X only works with a relatively small number of TVs from LG, Sony, and Philips at the moment. Both companies say they're working with Dolby and Microsoft to create firmware updates for their Dolby Vision TVs, but there's no word yet on when those firmware updates might roll out or which specific models will get updated. Furthermore, LG's 2016 TVs don't work with Xbox One's versions of Dolby Vision, and their official statement is that they haven't decided what to do yet. I don't know. That's their official statement? I don't know. No, we thought it would, and then it didn't. So now we're like, I don't know.
Yeah, the official words were like, we have not yet decided. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
So there's user reports from Denon, Marantz, and Onkyo receivers from users that own them. They all seem to be passing Dolby Vision signals from Xboxes just fine, but Yamaha receivers are not. Official word? I don't know.
That's questionable. I mean, on Microsoft's own blog, they're like, here's a list of compatible AV receivers, and there are Yamaha models listed, but of course not every Yamaha model is listed, so it's very possible that the people who were reporting, and this is mostly like on Reddit, it could be one of the models that isn't on the list, or maybe they mistook which TV they have and it's not a compatible TV, because of course both things need to be compatible.
Right.
So, I mean, bottom line, you want to check the lists. They are posted on Microsoft's blog about Dolby Vision and the Xbox One S and X, so you want to make sure that all of your gear is on their lists of officially supported devices, but just having the Dolby Vision logo on your device, not a guarantee whatsoever, not at this point. And it might in the future with a firmware update, but Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful when you can have a logo that says Dolby Vision on a whole bunch of things, and then they're like, yeah, but not really.
Well, sometimes Dolby Vision, not all the time. We didn't say 20. We said we were open 24 hours. We didn't say in a row.
That's right. Yeah, that's about right.
But you know, honestly, this is new technology. It's exactly what happens every single time. So, and we love to complain about it and mock them for it. But the reality is, you know, they're working with so many different companies, making so many different products, and not everybody
with technology that is constantly changing.
Right. So but it is funny, especially with the responses. We thought it would, but apparently it doesn't. So now we got an engineer locked in our basement working 100-hour work weeks to figure it out. So don't do that. Don't work 100-hour work weeks. It's terrible. All right, I got some comments here. Damien on Twitter and Jackson, I guess, also commented on this. Damien tested out the Apple TV 4K and Apple TV 3rd generation for us. Apparently he has both of them. He couldn't find any way to prevent either Apple TV model from going through the whole setup process again every time he switched between displays. So if you got both a projector and a flat panel, it seems as though you'll have to go through the setup on the Apple TV every time you switch. Yay!
I mean, it's not a super long process, but it's still annoying, obviously.
Stupid. But on the Netflix front, he found that the Apple TV 3rd generation does indeed dump you back to the beginning of your My List every time while you're browsing, which is super annoying, but the Apple TV 4K does not. Can't stop Netflix from changing the thumbnail art, but at least navigating your list on the Apple TV 4K is a nicer experience. And Jackson confirmed the newer Apple TV models that run the latest versions of tvOS can download apps from the App Store, and can download apps from the App Store, have the newest Netflix interface, while older models are stuck with an older version of Netflix, which makes sense, actually. Really.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. Well, yeah, I'm not sure if that entirely solves. It was what Nick and Brandon were both asking about Apple TVs connected to projectors and flat panels at the same time and that. So, not sure if that quashes all of your fears. But
let me tell you something about Apple right now, Haas. You people that are connecting to both a TV and a projector are such a minority that they are never going to fix that.
I don't think Apple's going to worry about that too much. Yeah.
It is there. I predict 0.0001% chance this will ever be addressed in the future.
But like, if you want both Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos from Netflix,
you have to go through
Xbox One S and X and Apple TV 4K. Those are the boxes that can do that. But of course, the Xbox One S and X have more restrictions on your other gear that's connected. The Apple TV 4K remains my top choice if you want an external box that can do both Dolby things from Netflix.
Ooh, I can't wait till a month from now when somebody watches this video on YouTube and gets to this point and starts angrily commenting about how, didn't you know, you idiots, that the NVIDIA Shield could do all this stuff too? Yeah, dude, we didn't know because we're not from the frickin' future. Okay? Rage quit.
Who knows what's going to happen?
My voice hurts. All right, let's get to the questions here. Josh. All right. First up, Josh wanted to reassure us that he's well aware of the need for an air return path in his basement. We talked about Josh a while back, and he had like some layout plans, and he had this office and the whatever, and we were like, dude, you got to make sure you have air return or it's the entire space.
Yep.
So he knew this. This house was built from the ground up when Josh bought it, and he anticipated wanting to finish the basement. So air return and air exchange was all built into the original plans, and he can close his utility room without concern on that front. So that means that he can, in fact, enclose his room the way that we thought he could. Though putting the subwoofer in the back left corner and the front right corner of the office would have been awesome.
Still humorous, but unnecessary, thankfully.
We were correct that he does not intend to spend upwards of $8,000 on his projector. Oh, really?
It was a stab in the dark, but we got
you
that
and everybody
right.
else. Yeah. And since we insisted that his dual SVS PB12 NSD subwoofer should be fine for his basement room size, he's looking at a budget of about $3,000 for a projector and a screen. All right. If you have a fixed frame screen, then you're looking at about $2,800 for a projector.
Exactly. Yeah.
You get $200 for a silver stick screen. That's led him to consider the Epson 5040 UB, the Optima UHD 65, or possibly even the less expensive Epson 4010. The last projector he had was a Panasonic AE900. He wants much better black levels than that projector offered. So what projector would we recommend? Don't we normally say the JVCs are the best ones with the black levels? Is that what he's worried about?
Yeah,
he's worried about black levels, right?
Yeah, the JVCs are definitely the best for the black levels. The challenge is going to be getting one that's under $3,000.
Yeah, right, sure. So.
But it can be done. Now, you're going to have to go back, I guess, 2 model years at this point, because, of course, they've just brought out their new NX5, NX7, and NX9, so those would be the current generation. And before that, we had the X590 and 790 and 990. So if you go one generation before that to the X570, 770, and 970, that's where you could find models on sort of the lowest end, quote unquote, of JVC's lineup that you can find for under $3,000 now. So, for example, the RS420, which is the same as the X570, because they loved having the JVC Pro and the JVC Consumer, but they're sister models and identical. You can get the RS420 right now on Amazon for under $3,000. And so, of course, some people are going to be concerned because you had the the 420 and you had the 520. And the 520 claims even better black levels and even higher contrast and even wider color.
Right.
But the 420 is absolutely no slouch. I mean, compared to every other projector that's out there, it's native contrast. And I harp on that because you'll see the dynamic contrast thing, which is like when the dynamic iris is in effect and all of that, and you'll see those numbers being claimed. But to me, it's really important that your native contrast, here's a bright object right next to a dark object, and you can't do anything with the iris about that. It has to, be at some level. That is really important, and those still have very good native contrast, especially compared to any other projector that you could even consider. So the 420, while it doesn't hit full DCI-P3, it hits like 89 or 90% of it, so it's definitely still wide color, right? That's the one I would aim you towards, RS420 over on Amazon. You get it for under $3,000. Now, you will have to go for a less expensive screen to stay right around $3,000 total for projector and screen, but go silver ticket and it can be done.
Right. Is JVC the one that takes so long to switch between sources?
It is. JVC is the one with a very slow HDMI switching. Now, if you are only using one HDMI input and are always sending that projector a 4K signal, or you don't really mind that when you switch between 1080p and 4K, there's going to be like a 30-second delay, then that's not too much of a problem. But I know it's ridiculous, but I mean, everything else kind of makes it worth it, right? But if that's too expensive, then you definitely are going to want to look at Epson. Now, I would kind of wait at this point until the 5050 UB comes out, because it should be right around $2,700 brand new when it comes out. So that's still going to be within the price range. The 5040 UB would be a great alternative. It's down to $2,300 officially now. So we were saying we expected to see it down to about $2,100 by the end of the year. I think that's likely. It's down to $2,300 now. But what that cannot do is 4K at 60 frames per second. It's limited to 4K in HDR at 24 frames per second. The 5040 UB is. The 5050 UB has the upgraded HDMI inputs that can do 4K at 60 Hz with HDR.
All right. So even if he doesn't decide exactly on which projector he's going to get right the second, he wants to be able to plan the mounting location, since all of the framing is starting soon. The screen will be between 120 and 130 inches. So can he work backwards from there and plan his mounting location ahead of time in his roughly 15 by 20 foot theater area? Well, yeah, you can go to projectorcentral.com and look at their throw distance calculator and see which fits both the JVCs, because he's looking at JVCs and Epsons.
JVCs and Epsons, both of which offer very long zoom ranges and lots of lens shift. So that's great, because it gives you a lot of options.
Yeah.
So should I give a few numbers just so he knows? Yeah. If you go, so I was like, let's say he goes to a 135-inch screen. He was like, it's going to be 120, 130, but 135 is a common size. So I'm like, let's say you go really big. There, we're worried about the closest you can get the lens to the screen, because there's a certain distance it needs to be from the screen in order to throw an image that large. And the closest that the JVCs could get to throw a big 135-inch screen would be 13 feet 9 inches from lens to screen. So his room is 20 feet long. Should be fine. And the Epsons can be 13 feet 3 inches. But essentially, if you put the lens about 14 feet away, you're great for either one. And if you wanted to go to the smaller end of what he was saying, 120 inches, either of them could be as far away, because now we're like, okay, there's a certain distance away. It can't be farther than that and throw an image that small. Well, either of them could be a little more than 24 feet away, and his room is only 20 feet long. So
it sounds like he just put it right on the back wall.
He could absolutely mount it on a shelf on his back wall, or he could ceiling mount it anywhere, like just say 14 feet from lens to the front wall. Yeah. Anywhere behind that, you've got 6 feet to play with in your 20-foot long room.
I would 100% put it on my back wall.
Put it on the back wall. It is easier to just mount it on a shelf on the back wall. And again, both of these have lots of lens shift, so it's no problem.
Especially since he's doing framing and stuff like that, he could actually build like almost a hush box around it too, as a soffit, and then throw it in there. And the money that he would spend, if he's ground up construction here, the money that he would have spent on a good, nice, well, I mean, you can get a cheap $20 projector mount, but mean, if he had spent like money on a good one that he could adjust and stuff like that, that's that's like $100 sometimes, even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, these are not small projectors, so like even if you had basically them right against the back wall, the lens is going to be about 18 and a half feet from the screen, because they're more than a foot deep from front to back, these projectors. So you're looking at like 18 to 18 and a half feet anyway, which is like right in the butter zone. So yeah, mounting on the back wall would be a great idea in either of these.
All right, Chris got back to us with some more details about his bedroom setup. Okay, so he told us some things, and he had some very small mica speakers or something like that.
That's right. Yep. And he wanted to upgrade.
He wanted to upgrade, and we were like not sure where he was sitting and not sure of any of these other things. And I don't remember what we told him, but anyways, it's a very small room and a rental, so his listening viewing area position is on his bed, which is what we thought maybe might be the case. And he doesn't have anywhere to install acoustic treatments or a second subwoofer. Okay.
Which were like our top suggestions before upgrading speakers. Have you considered these things? They're like, yep, but can't be done. Too small, and it's a rental.
Chris also says that he's visually impaired, so he has to be very close to his TV in order to see it. So is the TV also on the bed?
Well, the TV's right beside the bed, and he gave us a view of essentially what it's like when he's watching TV, and it's right up on that
it's
TV.
Right on the bed. It's like if you were lying on, if you're at the foot of the bed, it's the left side of the bed. It'd be on the nightstand. Basically, that's how close this TV is.
Or just you're lying in bed, roll over onto your right shoulder, and there's the TV.
Yeah. Okay. Oh wow, I didn't see those pictures before.
Yeah.
So in order to see it, that has resulted in his center speaker being right below his TV, his front right speaker being exceedingly close to the TV and center close to this TV and the center on the right, and his front left speaker being on the speaker stand at the foot of his bed aimed towards him. So one is right next to his head, and one is way at his feet.
That's correct.
If you're lying down. His surrounds are on a dresser behind him, and despite the strange-looking placement, he says it creates a convincing surround field. Okay, I'll take your word for it. So given that he is inches from his center and front right, but his front left is much further away, what is the recommendation for a speaker upgrade now? Would the more expensive Ascend HTM-200SE be worth it, or should he stick with his original idea of NHT SuperZeros to replace his micas? I don't remember how big those Ascends are. It feels like they're too big.
Well, I mean, looking at what he has for a center right now, if you put an HTM-200SE horizontally, it'd be a little bit taller than that. Because
I can't even see the center. How am I not seeing this?
If you see the one that's right up on the television, it's what the TV is standing on. That's his center speaker.
Oh, that's a center speaker.
And then the front right is right beside those, right beside the TV and the center speaker. But yeah, I mean, the Ascends would fit. I'm not worried about them physically not fitting. They are larger than what you have now, and they are larger than the SuperZeros, but they would fit where you have. I mean, so the mica speakers that he's describing, I haven't heard them. Going by all the reviews, they seem to be very impressive for the price, which is great. But I mean, to me, it's questionable whether the SuperZeros. I think the SuperZeros probably would be an upgrade, just given how good we think they are. But are they going to be like
a huge upgrade?
Really big upgrade? Probably not. I mean, what I love about the Ascend HTM-200SEs is they're, to me, like the starting point where you go, okay, if I'm listening to these speakers and I haven't done anything super wonky with my AV receiver or EQ settings or something like that, then if I don't like what I'm hearing, it means I don't like this recording. Like, to me, they reach that level of transparency where it's like they're so accurate to the signal source that they are just conveying what's being fed to them without altering it hardly at all. If that's what you're after, they could be worth it to you, but it's a questionable upgrade to me. I mean, obviously, we're not worried about output capabilities.
Right.
Like, you're right up on these things, no matter what you're using.
I kind of agree with you. I in this sort of setup, where you're so very close to everything, you're asking speakers to do so little.
Right.
I mean, you're so close to them that a lot of times I wonder how much you're going to be able to notice. Like if you got like highly efficient clip speakers, you'd be like, oh no, man, yeah, everything sounds kind of the same. I mean, you're so close to everything. I don't know.
Like if you're going to do this and spend this money, I want it to be that was definitely worth having spent this money. So I don't want to take a half step You know, I want this to be a
How much money does he have? Do we remember?
like $300, so, or $350.
Man, dude, it gets to the headphones.
I know, right? Although if you're lying on your side,
lying on your
that's not the most
side, you don't want
comfortable
to.
thing.
Yeah, but if you're lying on your side watching TV, you only got one ear up. How the other ear is buried in the pillow. How,
Like I would put it to you this way: if it were me, if this were my money and this were my setup, I would consider the Ascends. I probably wouldn't go for the SuperZeros, even though I do think they'd most likely be a bit of an upgrade. They'd be a small upgrade. I would consider for myself getting the Ascends because I'm like, to me, that's the beginning of full transparency to the signal. But I still wouldn't like urge someone to do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's right there.
If it were me, I would be like, if it were my money, I would, and I really wanted to spend it. Mm-hmm. I could go either way. I'd end up flipping the coin. I think he really wants the SuperZeros, in which case I think he should get the SuperZeros. But honestly, I think you should just not. I think you should not spend any money. I think you should wait.
I mean, where is the upgrade level where we'd be like, oh yeah, for sure, you're now at an upgrade level where I'm not going to question it. Man, you know,
RBHs maybe.
Yeah, could be.
But
those are physically a lot larger, right? That's going to be tough to fit in there.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. In this setup, I just don't know what you can do that's not headphones. Like headphones, you. It'd be something
like, I mean, if you went all the way to something like KEF LS50s, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a huge, but that's also $1,500 a pair. A little bit different price bracket.
Those would be. You would definitely notice the difference.
Yes.
But yeah, at $750 a pop, they are not.
Not
exactly
in the price range
in
you were
the same
considering.
Price range, yeah, and you know, I guess this goes right along with what we say about subwoofers too, isn't it? You know, we can say you have little, you have cheap, or you can have
it's like the person who has $350 to spend on a sub.
Yeah,
right. It's like, oh man, like yes, you can get something that's better than the home theater in a box sub that you have right now. That's for sure. But if you could get up to $450, $500 now, we're like, yeah, it's worth it. But in the speakers, I'm like, it might be even more. So yeah. I'll put it to you this way. If I were going to do this upgrade, I would consider the Ascend HTM-200SEs. I think those are the beginning of true transparency to the signal. And to me, that could be worth it. But if you got them and you're like, oh, this wasn't really worth it, I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. So
I would honestly save your money. I would. I know that sounds terrible, but I would. I think I would.
It's tough.
It's a very tough decision. Now, if you buy something and love it, I'm going to be very happy for you.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Our concern is not that that there isn't going to be a difference. It's just that we're not sure if it's going to be a big enough difference to justify $300 worth of expenditure. So, all right, Luke on Twitter. Luke wants to spend. I'm stuck in the spending mode. Luke wants a new 55-inch TV. He'd like all the 4K and HDR bells and whistles, and he'd like to keep the price under $1,000. That's totally doable these days.
It is,
oddly enough. That budget had him leaning towards TCL, but he's seen some refurbished LG OLEDs get down to just under $1,000. He hasn't kept up on every tiny detail about every LG OLED model. They seem to have every letter of the alphabet plus a number at the end of the model numbers. Are there any specific OLED series to look for or to avoid? I have no idea.
So I would say look for a 7 or an 8 on the end of the model number. Now, thankfully, they line up. Like, if it's a 6 on the end, it came out in 2016. 7 on the end came out in 2017. 8 on the end came out in 2018. So at least LG has made that much line up fairly understandably. And regardless of the letter in front, they all use the same panels. Okay. So there's essentially no difference now in the B8 versus the everything above B in the alphabet. In the 8 series, the B8 does use a slightly different processor inside, but honestly, all the reviews have said, like, yeah, you're never going to see it. So, as long as it has a 7 or an 8 at the end, regardless of the letter, they all use the exact same panel. The thing is, though, getting it for under $1,000, well, that's kind of his second question. Right? I'm a little bit hesitant on that because he's asking, like, what do we think about getting refurbished OLEDs? Now, I've bought 2 refurbished televisions so far, and they both have small issues. And I think, so I'm a huge fan of getting a refurbished AV receiver from Accessories for Less. I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a little bit less keen on getting refurbished televisions because usually they are customer returns. That's the bulk of what ends up being sold as B stock or refurbished. And it's not that they're broken. Both of my televisions function just fine, but they have a small, imperfection to them, which doesn't rise to the level of being a defect, according to the manufacturer. If you have one stuck pixel, in fact, most of them allow like 8 to 10 stuck pixels without calling it a fully defective panel. Now, how anal retentive are you? If it's one stuck pixel up in a corner, you're probably not going to care, but maybe you really super duper do. Maybe that's you, and that's going to be unacceptable. The likelihood of that being the case on a refurbished TV is pretty high, to be honest.
Yeah.
So $1,000. Now, you could get a very nice TV. I would probably point you towards Vizio's P series. In all the reviews, it's basically what I predicted, which is like Vizio's M series, really nice. TCL's 6 series, a small step above Vizio's M series. Vizio's P series, a small step above TCL's 6 series. That seems to be sort of the order that almost every reviewer who has reviewed all 3 of those series has gone in. So the Vizio P series is still well affordable at 55 inches, under $1,000. So I would probably point you there. It's a really nice TV. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just so much more sensitive to video imperfections than we are for
because one error can be enough that you're like every time your eye just goes right to it. Right? Yeah. Whereas, but I mean, some people don't care at all.
Right.
In which case, consider an OLED, but it's tough. The OLEDs aren't really down at that price yet.
Yeah. Okay. So Terry says, "Can open worms everywhere. Save me from the worms." All right, 2 episodes ago, we talked about dual subwoofer outputs and independent distance settings. Terry has a Marantz SR6011 with Audyssey Multi-Q XT32 and SubEQ HT. He has 2 rows of seats. The back row being on a 10-inch riser, he's got 2 subs. The room is roughly 20 feet long and 13 feet wide, though not a perfect rectangle, as it's a bump out for the door. That's close enough, dude. Yeah. He put his sub at the midpoint of the back wall and the other side of the midpoint of his front wall. Sounds great. Mm-hmm. He cares about both rows of seats, so he wound up making mic position 1 a location that is in between his 2 rows of seats. So physically, the subs on the back wall is about 6 feet from mic position 1, and the sub on the front wall is about 10.5 feet from mic position 1. Audyssey set them 6.3 feet and 18.2 feet respectively. So he definitely has some significant distance settings. Significantly different distance settings, and Audyssey has attempted to time align the 2 subs. He thinks the room sounds really good, but now we've scared him. Is he not getting optimal bass performance? What is the deal with the time alignment versus strictly mono subwoofer signal stuff? Okay, I know that seems like a long distance, but sound moves at like 300 and something miles per hour, so it's not really that big of a deal. It's not that far. All right, it's not that far to begin with. Okay, whenever somebody starts off their thing with, I think it sounds good, but okay, just stop.
I know. Well, we know who we're talking to.
I know. Okay, so
audience.
Yes. So this is what happened. And for those of you that weren't part of the conversation before, which would include almost everybody, one of our listeners, Ray Coronado, who is a installer in his off time, I guess he has 2 positions. I'm not really sure.
He's a calibrator.
Job and a calibrator or something like that. Anyways, he has like 6 different subs in his room.
No, he's got 4. Oh no, he does have 5. You're right. He's got that 5th one. He's got the
mid bass
module.
Thing.
You're right.
So he has the 4 subs in the corners, and he time aligned all of them, meaning that he used individual distance settings to make sure that the sound from that sub hit the mic at the same time as every other sound from the sub.
Right. So each of the 4 subs got a different distance setting.
Right. Yeah. And in the end, that was less accurate, less even across all the seats than just sending a mono signal to all 4 subs.
Right.
Right. This is where this whole discussion
which is what the Harman research also indicates. In the Harman research, they're sending one mono signal to however many subs, be it 1, 2, 4, an infinite number. They're sending one mono signal to all the subs, meaning that all subs are sharing the same distance setting in the AV receiver. Even though physically they're different distances from mic position number 1, the goal was to get uniform response across all the seats, and they found that just sending one mono signal, one distance setting to all subs was the best way to achieve the uniformity.
I was going to turn on my Audyssey editor app and see if I can't figure out what my distance settings are, but I don't feel like dealing with it right now. But I know they're close. They're within a foot or two of each other,
right.
And it may even be closer than that.
Well, but we should mention that the counterpoint to this is there are plenty of people out there, including Gene at Audioholics, including the people at Audyssey, who believe that time aligning the subwoofers, giving each subwoofer an individual distance setting so that they are time aligned to the first microphone position, just like all of your other speakers, believe that is an important step to do. That is the correct way to do it, that each sub should have its own distance setting. So there are differing opinions on this. The difference is that Harman and Ray and myself, we all did the measurements, and it turned out that the mono signal worked better. So I don't know.
Yeah, the reality though, in most people's rooms, and even in this distance setting, they say 6.3 feet versus 18.2 feet. I mean, that's pretty significant. But I bet if you run it again, you'll get difference.
Well, he was saying he's run it multiple times and gotten very consistent results out of it.
No, that's good. That means he's got his room treated or something like that.
Yeah,
maybe more bass trapping at the back of his room versus the front of the room or something along those lines. So I would not worry about it if it were me, especially since you say it sounds good already.
Right,
if you're really worried about it, then your subs are already calibrated as far as their volume. That is done for you.
Right.
It has been done.
Yes.
So whatever you see the levels, well, maybe it hasn't been done, because if what you would have to do...
Well, no, under SubEQ HT, it would have you level match the two subs for sure.
Right, but if you were a little bit up or a little bit down, it will set the trim levels differently for each of the two subs. It will do that.
It will,
sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Individual trim levels, yeah.
Right, but if you were to want to use, go to a Y splitter off of one...
Right.
Then what you would want to do is go back to Audyssey and rerun Audyssey so that your subs the trims are exactly the same. That would be the easiest way to do it without using a SPL meter if he doesn't have one. Sounds like this guy probably has one. But if he doesn't have one, you have to make sure the trim levels are the same. Then you would just unplug it from one, plug it into the other one, and then have it set to tell it you have a mono. Just plug it into a Y splitter going off of sub out one, and then tell it you only have one sub.
That's right. Yeah.
It should be fun too.
So I mean, as much as we talk, so this is one of those things. We get into the details about taking measurements, looking at Room EQ Wizard graphs, and all this kind of stuff, and people get really far into it. I want to stress that myself, I come back to doing it by ear, because ultimately that's what I care about.
Right.
I can look at a Room EQ Wizard measured graph of my own response in my own room and go, oh, there actually are some small humps and dips going along in my frequency response in my bass or other parts of the frequency spectrum from other speakers. They exist. I can measure them. I can't hear them, not readily. I am worried about playing a sweep and to my human ears and my human brain going, oh, that's pretty darn even all the way throughout. That's what I care about as my end result. And it sounds like that's what you already have. At which point I go, I'm done. I am satisfied. I can play a bass sweep, and no matter which seat I sit in my theater, I go, that's a pretty even bass sweep. I don't hear a huge peak or a huge suck out at any seat at any part of the frequency response, and I'm happy. I'm done.
When before I had multiple subs, before I did, proper placement and everything else, before we even knew about any of this stuff, and I was just using the SMS1 and a bunch of other stuff to try to make my room sound better, when clearly there was nothing that was going to make it sound that great, because it was a non-optimal room with openings to everything else in the house, and it was just a mess. I lived with bad bass for so long. It is very clear that I do not have bad bass now. I mean, you have bad bass because at one point you're like, something's happening on the screen and you hear nothing, and another time something happens on the screen and you're like, holy crap, what's wrong with the subwoofer? And you stare at it, you look at it, you go, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you breaking? Are you all right? And then it goes away. You're like, okay, that was weird.
Yep.
And that's the sort of thing where you're like, okay, if you have bad response, you will know. It's not like subtle usually.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, I used to have the 2 subwoofer set up, both of them at the front of the room, basically acting as my front, left, right speaker stands.
Yeah.
That's what I had before. And I had the situation where so I've got a 3-seater couch. That's all that's in my theater. But so sitting in the middle, it sounded darn good. That was very satisfying in the middle seat. But if I moved to my left seat, I would get a hump at around 60 hertz, which is very audible, very audible. And if I sat in my right seat, I got a dip at 60 hertz. And this is with 2 subs in the room, both of them up at the front. And the middle seat sounded fine. Now, that's an untenable situation if what you're going for is every seat is a good seat, because you can't EQ that. If you boost it to help out the right seat, then you've made the left seat even worse. And if you cut it to help the left seat, you've made the right seat even worse. You can't do anything with EQ at that point. Audyssey couldn't help you in that situation. And I would have to do something if I couldn't physically move my subs. I would have to play with the phase or the distance setting of 1 sub at a time to try and counter that out. So, Terry, I completely understand your worry, but go by your ears. If you're like, it sounds really good, I can sit in any of my seats and I can play a bass sweep and I don't hear a big hump or a dip in any of my seats, you're done. Yeah. All right? Don't worry that, you absolutely, if you measured every single one of your seats, you're going to see slightly different curves on that Room EQ Wizard graph. That's still going to happen, but go by your ears. That is what you have to go by. But if you are setting it up, the theory and so far the practice that I have gone through and that Ray has gone through and that Harman has gone through is that, yes, the mono signal does tend to work because you are first attempting to get uniform bass by the placement in your room, and then you want one setting basically for all. They are acting as one sub. They are acting in unison. So even, mind-wise, that kind of makes sense. But having these slightly different settings, like, for example, if you set them up and you can't get uniform bass, you have to start playing with individual phase or individual distance settings. And sometimes you might end up with very different phase or distance settings on purpose to get the uniform bass. It sounds like you, by chance, already achieved it, so don't worry yourself about it.
All right, John, Allen, and Lemuel, I guess is all these people
all
have
related,
the same series of questions here. John is waiting for the Epson 5040 UB to drop in price a bit, but he intended to get an Ultra HD Blu-ray player once he has the Epson so that he can enjoy 4K and HDR. He spotted a Sony X800 player on clearance at Target, so on the whim he bought it, but he couldn't remember clearly if it was the good one, or should he return it? Or should he keep it? The X800 was the go-to until the Panasonic came out.
Yes,
so
but
it doesn't do Dolby Vision, right? Is that the thing that doesn't do?
The X800 does not do Dolby Vision. Never will. But for a projector, that's totally fine because there are no projectors that do Dolby Vision, which is actually kind of already answering one of the upcoming questions. But yeah, so for slightly different reasons. So if you have a projector like the 5040 UB that can actually just take an HDR10 signal and display it in an HDR picture mode, then it kind of doesn't matter which Ultra HD Blu-ray player you use because all of them can output HDR10, and your projector can display HDR10 in an HDR10 picture mode. Where the X800 was super useful was for a lot of projectors that don't do HDR, so you needed to convert HDR to SDR, to standard dynamic range, or you have a projector that can technically do HDR, but it doesn't do it very well, so you would prefer to convert HDR to SDR in the player and then send an SDR signal to your projector, even though the source was HDR. The X800 was useful because it has good HDR to SDR conversion and the ability to manually change that to overall brighten or dim the image to a level that's suitable for your projector, but in SDR. That was the feature of the X800 that we liked, was the HDR to SDR conversion. The Panasonic is a different situation. We'll get into that coming up.
So Alan uses a projector, and he was considering getting the Sony X800 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, but then you heard us saying that the new Panasonic UB820 is sort of the new go-to now that Oppo stopped selling players. The Panasonic is more expensive, and it does play SACDs, which Alan still listens to from time to time. So would the Panasonic be worth it over the Sony? And the answer is, no.
Probably not, yeah. So what the Panasonic has, which is actually kind of unique to the Panasonic, even the Oppos didn't do this. So you had the Sony, which did nice HDR to SDR conversion and let you overall brighten or dim the image. The Oppo did really, really good HDR to SDR conversion and gave you very granular control. I mean, it gave you a choice of 4 different curves for the HDR to SDR conversion, and then you could granularly change what maximum nit level it was targeting to begin with. And I mean, it gave you a lot of fine control that the Sony didn't even give you, but that was all HDR to SDR conversion. The Panasonic UB820 also does that. It also does really good HDR to SDR conversion, so it's still the top go-to if that's what you want to do, is convert HDR to SDR. But it has a totally brand new feature, which I don't think any other Ultra HD Blu-ray player has, which is it can take an HDR10 signal, look at the original metadata that was on the disc, or, on the disc. In this case, it's a disc player. And then... So let's say you took that original HDR10 signal and you sent that straight to your TV or your projector. Now it's up to however your TV or projector tone maps an HDR10 signal. That's ultimately what you're going to see. Well, what the Panasonic can do is intervene and re-tone map the original HDR10 signal so that what comes out of the Panasonic is a signal that your TV does not have to tone map. So let's say you're using an OLED TV and its maximum light output is about 650 nits, right?
Right.
So if you sent it the original HDR10 signal, the maximum nit level might have been 1,000, it might have been 4,000, it might have been 10,000. We don't know. It's whatever was in the original signal. And the OLED is going to tone map that however it can. Well, you can tell the Panasonic, hey, no matter what HDR10 signal, send out a maximum nit level of 650 nits. Now the OLED doesn't have to tone map it at all. It's like what's coming out of the Panasonic is something I can just show natively without tone mapping it at all. So the Panasonic can do the tone mapping. Now that can be very useful for a projector because you can go, okay, I know my projector isn't getting anywhere close to even 500 nits. It's more like 200 nits max or something like that. And you can tell the Panasonic, hey, tone map everything down so that the projector can just show it without the projector having to do any tone mapping. So, it could still be useful, but if just sending the original HDR10 signal to the projector and putting the projector in its HDR mode looks okay to you, you don't need any of these. You could use any Ultra HD Blu-ray player. They can all output the original HDR10. Yeah, so it's a little iffy.
All right. Lastly, Lem has Sony's X700 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He says he would have preferred the sturdier build quality of the X800 or the X1000. There's an X1000?
There was, yeah. That was in their ES series.
Right. But neither of those models can do Dolby Vision, correct? Well, I know the X800 can't do it, so I didn't even know about X1000.
Yeah, the 1000 was like actually the very first player they ever announced. Right. It was like $1,000 something. It cannot do Dolby Vision either.
And Lem wants to know, is Dolby Vision in a disc player really that big of a deal? Well, it's not if you have a projector.
Not if you have a projector.
Or a TV that doesn't do Dolby Vision, then it's not a big deal at all. It's an unneeded feature that you cannot use. But if you have a TV that can use it, then yeah, it is a bit of a deal.
It's nice to have.
I think so, yeah. So he lists this display as being a Sony something 4K projector. So would the lack of Dolby Vision in the disc player be any sort of deficiency? Nope.
Nope, because your projector can't do Dolby Vision. So yeah, no need for it at all. Yeah, I mean, again, you're sending it out to a nice Sony 4K projector that actually does a pretty darn good job already of just taking any HDR signal, HDR10 signal, and tone mapping it. So in your case, you could basically use any Ultra HD Blu-ray player in Lem's case. So yeah, it's all this. If you want to convert HDR to SDR, you've got 3 good choices. The Oppo is kind of out of the running, so you're down to the Sony X800 or the Panasonic now. I'm still waiting for Panasonic's UB420 to come out. I mean, back in January, they said it was going to be released in North America. Haven't seen hide nor hair of it yet, but it's less expensive. And the difference between the UB420 and the UB820 is that the 820 can do Dolby Vision, which we've just been saying you don't need if you have a projector. So save some money and get the 420, but you can't because it's not released in North America yet for some reason. But if you're willing to wait, I might wait on the UB420 from Panasonic because it'll cost less, but it'll still do all of the HDR to SDR conversion stuff, and it'll still do the HDR retone mapping inside of the player. So that would kind of be the one to keep an eye on if you're willing to wait. What an answer.
We're so helpful. Ilango and David from Facebook hit us up. They wanted, if you want to to back up Ultra HD Blu-rays using MakeMKV, what's the best UHD friendly drive to get these days? Lots of places are reporting that if you buy one of the drives that used to get recommended all the time, it's now coming up with the newest drivers already pre-installed that don't let you back up Ultra HD disc and don't let you easily roll back the drivers to an older version. Now, we talked about this
a year in.
We talked about this a while ago, and there's like a specific drive that is like they have an external version and an internal version. The internal version can be used for the the backups, but the external version cannot.
Correct.
So people were taking the internal version and just putting it into a case.
Yes.
And then using it as an external drive. So is that what has to happen?
Well, so I'll start off by saying the best thing to do is to actually go to MakeMKV's forums, and they have a whole Ultra HD section now in their forum, and that's where you're going to find the most up-to-date information, because believe me, the people over at MakeMKV on their forums, they're worried about this stuff and they're on top of it. And so there's sticky threads and everything about Ultra HD friendly drives. Now, there's a hardware aspect to this, which is that there are some drives that have a little bit of difficulty reading the 3-layer discs,
right,
which are kind of rare. Almost all the Ultra HD Blu-rays that are out there are 2-layer discs, and most of the drives that are on the list can read those just fine, but some of them have had issue with the handful of 3-layer discs that are out there. So the top recommendation from a hardware perspective that has no trouble reading the 3-layer discs remains the Asus BW-16D1HT. That's the model number.
Off the tongue.
Yep, of the Asus drive. That is an internal optical disc drive. It's not an external USB connected drive or anything like that. It's an internal drive. You could put it in a case, but you are correct. People are reporting that now if you buy one retail box, it's coming with the latest 3.2 driver set, and it's not letting you back up Ultra HD Blu-rays anymore, and you can't just go into your device manager and easily roll back the driver. It's preventing you from doing that. So apparently they caught on. So once again, you head back to MakeMKV's forums, and first of all, there are a couple of people there selling drives which they have rolled back the firmware on. They're purchasing the retail drives,
wow,
and going through the process of rolling back the firmware. There are instructions on the forum for how you can roll back the firmware. It is not a simple process. You basically have to go back to Windows 7 and run something from the DOS prompt.
Oh my God.
So it's a little involved.
Jeez.
But as long as you're willing to follow the instructions, you can do it, and it's right there. They put it 100% firmware downgrade for Asus BW-16D1HT, and they got the process in there. So if you're willing to follow the instructions and go through the whole rigmarole, or you can just buy one from a couple of the people on that forum who are doing the process for you and selling them. So it's not as easy as it used to be. It's not as easy as just buying one at retail and making sure you don't update the drivers, because they're coming with the updated drivers now, a little bit unfortunately. But there are these solutions. You can either do it yourself if you're willing to go through the process, or just purchase one that someone else has done for you. It's kind of the answer.
Brannon. First up, Brandon says thanks for alleviating his worries about his Ascend Horizon RAAL speakers being too big for his room and getting him excited about finishing his theater. You're welcome, I guess. I don't remember. Anyways, he purchased the Denon X4400H, and he says he and his wife were both very impressed with the difference Audyssey Multi-Q XT32 made. It seems to have corrected the boominess that he was originally making him think the Horizons were too big, and they sound amazing now, so he's very pleased. All right, good.
That's good.
Excuse me. So he needs proper speaker stands for the front, left, and right speakers. Isn't there an ideal height he should look for? And do we have any recommendations for where to shop for speaker stands? So ideal height kind of depends on a little bit on your furniture and a little bit on you. Mm-hmm. Basically, the tweeter should be at ear level.
Yes, and particularly in these speakers with the ribbon tweeters, they have a fairly narrow vertical dispersion, so if you stand up or lie down on the floor, you will hear a high-frequency roll-off from these, so you do, particularly with these speakers, want your ears more or less at the same height as the tweeters themselves.
So if you've got your couch and you're good to go, then you sit down on your couch and you have your wife measure to where your ears are, ish, in the vicinity, and then you measure from the top, from the tweeter down to the bottom of the speaker. You need that much more room underneath it. So what is that? Well, usually you can kind of figure that out. But there are general speaker stands. Sanus is the people that I always go to for speaker stands. I like their stands. They have a number of different options there and of different styles that you can get. And I've been a big fan of them.
Yeah. Now, you're looking at the couch that he's gotten here. I don't know if this is the couch he's keeping, but it looks like a pretty standard North American couch. It doesn't look absurdly tall or absurdly short or anything like that.
Yeah,
and assuming you're of a normal human height of around, I don't know, 6 feet or so, we're going to assume...
5'7" is a normal human height. Thank you very much.
Well, for us it is, but for everyone else in North America, 6 feet is average for a grown man now. We stopped somewhere before that. Both of us.
Damn beef hormones. GMOs.
We're going to expect that your ears are somewhere in the vicinity of about 3 to 3.5 feet off the ground. That's normal for most people sitting in a normal sized couch. So the Horizon speakers, the tweeters of these are right in the middle of the speaker height wise, because it was originally designed as a center speaker.
Right.
So the tweeter is above a mid-range driver in the middle of that speaker. If it's placed horizontally, if it's vertical, like yours are for your front, left, right, that means the tweeter is right in the middle height-wise of this speaker. And that speaker is 23 inches tall if you've turned it vertically, so the center of the tweeter is going to be at 11.5 inches. So basically, if you add 24 inches to that, which is a very
standard speaker stand size,
very normal speaker size, that's going to get the tweeter right at about 36 inches off the ground. So I agree, Sanus is a great one. They've got lots of different styles at different price points. I will say, though, Monoprice, in their Monolith series, which I really like their Monolith series, they have a really nice 24-inch tall speaker stand. And it's about $100 a pair.
They must have been so proud of themselves when somebody came up with Monolith. Hey, we should call everything Monolith.
That's
That'd
right.
be awesome.
But one thing I like about the Monolith stand is that it has a nice wide base to hold the speaker at the top, and the Horizons are a pretty big speaker as far as using them as a bookshelf essentially goes. So I like that Monolith design, and it's a really nice design, and it's affordable for Monoprice. So about $100 a pair is what you're looking at there. So it's right in line with anything else. Ascend actually also sells their own pedestal stand, which is 24 inches tall. So that could also work, but it's a little bit more expensive than the Monolith. So yeah. Lots of Sanus, directly from Ascend or Monoprice. Those are great options.
He intends to make some DIY absorption panels, and following our advice, he'd like to place them at the first reflection points on the side walls. That would require putting them over the window on the right, which is fine as far as looks go, but should he do anything special to the window? Should he fill the bay of the window with insulation before putting a panel over it? No. I think so.
I mean, you've actually kind of built in an air gap.
Yeah, there's an air gap already. That just gives you an air gap.
It's the window bay.
Plus, I don't... I mean, how would you make that work?
Look okay from the outside?
Outside, yeah.
Well, I guess you could put in like
aluminum foil.
Like vertical blinds that are like pressed up against the window itself, then insulation on the inside of those vertical blinds. I don't know. No, honestly, no, you don't need to. You could actually just take a panel with no air gap of its own, put it right over that window, and you've given it an air gap essentially. Yeah, it's all good.
So he's thinking of making large 4-foot by 6-foot panels. Would those be too big? I mean, do they fit? Because if they
physically fit,
they're fine. I mean, we're going to tell you it's fine to put them up there.
I mean, might be a little bit unwieldy to mount just from like a physical. I am picking this up and hanging it on something. So you could make 2-foot or 4-foot by 3-foot panels or something. Like just physically, that might be easier for you to handle.
But they usually come in 4-foot by 2-foot.
That's sort of standard. But if you're making your own, obviously you can kind of do whatever.
You can cut them down, but I mean, it seems like it should be 4-foot by 8. Or I guess you could do 6 because you're 4 foot tall and then 3 of them, right?
Okay,
3 bays.
Yeah,
3 bays.
Yeah, you could do 4-foot by 2 foot and have 3 of them to make 4 by 6. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
No.
So he's thinking 4 inches of thickness might be a bit tough to accommodate. You can do a 4-foot by 8-foot panel, but the 4-inch thickness is the problem. All right, man. So what would he be losing by using 2-inch thick insulation with at most a 1-inch air gap, maybe less? How low in frequency should he be looking to absorb with these sidewall panels? Well, really, I mean, you're looking to catch that first reflection point that's mostly the upper end of the frequency response.
Yeah, in your case, we're talking about reflections from the speakers. We're not talking about building a bass trap with these. It's the reflections from the speakers,
So you're not going to be missing much of anything, to be honest with you. You're not trying to build bass traps with these, not based on the thickness and how. And your air gap's actually going to be quite a bit bigger, on
the one with the window,
window,
but on the other side, no, because the other side doesn't have a window. So
and that's fine. That's fine. I mean, if you want to build, I don't remember. I have to scroll back up. He hasn't have any bass trapping in this room, right? Nothing at all. But he's got those open bays up above.
But I mean, the thing is, so if you had 2-inch insulation with a 1 or a 2-inch air gap behind that, that's getting it down to like 125 hertz. That's great. That's perfect for a first reflection absorption panel. So if it were just the 2-inch insulation, like right against the hard wall, I mean, now you're in the sort of 250 hertz range, which is still very okay.
Yeah, that's basically what mine are.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I take it back.
Either way, we're not super worried about this.
Right.
But if you could put we're fine with using 2-inch thick insulation. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
If you could put a bit of an air gap on the left side to sort of equal the automatic air gap you're getting by having the window behind the right side, that'd be great. That'd be perfect. There.
All right, Miles. Miles has a Denon X4200W receiver, a Rotel RB976 6-channel amplifier, and 11 speakers. All of his speakers are B&Ws. He was thinking he could power his surround backs and 4 overhead speakers using his Denon and use the Rotel to power his front, left, right, and center. All 3 of his front speakers can be bi-amped. So how would he go about doing that? You don't.
Yeah.
I don't really see any. I've never seen any convincing reason to bi-amp any speaker ever. I mean, the only time that it makes sense to bi-amp a speaker was when some speaker designer literally physically segments the speaker so that you can't just plug it into one place.
Like, there is no crossover between the drivers, so you must use an external crossover and individual amplifiers for each driver. Like you gotta bi-amp then, because that's what you got. But
I would not bi-amp. I mean, there's just no reason. First of all, think about it. You've got, how much power does your tweeter need compared, or your mid-range driver need compared to your bass woofers? And there's not. They don't need that much. So why are they getting their own amplifier channel? I mean, it's not going to make any audible difference for you. There's no evidence that shows
he's got that 2 pairs of binding posts, though, Tom. Let's put them to use.
No.
I know. I'm in agreement. Hey. You really don't need to. But just to answer the question as wrote, all right, on the back of his Rotel, he's got basically 3 pairs of output channels on the back of this Rotel, right? So there's a right and left input times 3 and a right and left speaker binding outpost times 3. So all you would have to do is take the pre-out. So let's say you're doing what he was going to do is front, left, and right, and his center. So you would take the pre-out for your front, left, right, and center, attach that to a Y splitter, and the Y splitter now feeds both the left and the right input of each of those pairs, and now you have a pair of binding posts to bi-amplify your speakers. So physically, that's how you would do it, if that's all
if you decide to do this, front. Just make sure that you take off the... there's usually a little bar that connects the binding post to the back of your speaker.
Dear Lord.
You have to
creating
do
a short circuit. Man.
You have to do that, number one. Number two, if you really want to use both the top and the bottoms, you can do what I do, which is you keep the little metal bar on there, and then on the black one, you put that one on the bottom one, and the red one you put on the top. Now you're using both. You're using both, see? You're bi-amping it.
You really are not in that
You really are not.
But furthermore, I wanted to point out on the Rotel that he talked about, it has the ability to bridge any of those pairs.
Well, why don't you just do that? That actually makes sense.
Yeah, because that's giving you a whole lot more wattage available that isn't divided between, 100 watts goes to the tweeter and 100 watts goes to the woofer. Now you've got 200 watts that feeds the speaker.
The whole thing, yeah, right. Because you believe me, your tweeter does not need 100 watts.
It really doesn't. Yes, power is drawn, not pushed.
That's right.
So I would, if you really want to make use of all 6 amplifier channels to power 3 speakers, I would go ahead and bridge it because you can.
Yeah. So he says he bought Sewell Strike banana plugs. He says they don't seem to work with his Rotel amps. Are they just incompatible? How are you installing them? Because
yeah, I mean,
I looked at the binding post on that amp. There's no way these things don't fit. So just so everybody understands how banana plugs work, all right? So the binding posts, the red and black ones, there's usually a screw down, right? So you loosen them up, then you stick the wire through like the little hole in the side, and then you tighten them down, right? Well, you can do that for a bare wire. You can loosen them up, take a spade, put it through there, and then put it to around the side of the binding post and then tighten it down. Or you can loosen it up taking, what's the other one? The pin, right? Pin connection, that's more common in Europe than it is here. Put it through the hole, kind of like the bare wire, then tighten it down. But the banana plugs, you tighten them all the way down, and then on the back side of those screw downs, there's a hole. Now, a lot of times when you get your amp, inside those holes will be little rubber plugs.
Yes, but so particularly in Europe where they are required by law.
You will need to remove those plugs, and then you stick the red into the back of the red and the black in the back of the black. I cannot accept that these things do not work with this amplifier. Those are not custom.
No, those look like very regular binding posts, and the Strike plugs, I mean, they're just a compression fit, even if it's a well, I don't know, maybe it doesn't look like it's a really particularly large and loose binding post on the back of that Rotel.
It doesn't look like it's super small either, so that they wouldn't fit.
So I'm guessing, because I mean, when you look up that Rotel amp, it is like most of the images that come up on Google are out of Europe, where it did have those little plugs in the holes of the back of them.
That was the first thing I noticed too. They're like little gray plugs in there.
All of them had the holes in the back of those binding posts plugged. So if that's the case, and like I say, in Europe, it's required by law that they come plugged out of the box, but you can just remove those little plugs in the hole. So I don't know. I'm thinking that must be what it is. Otherwise, it's got to be a size that is completely not obvious to us just by looking at it.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Joe has been making steady improvements to his roughly 19 by 21 by 9 foot dedicated theater room. Crucially.
Importantly.
I understand what the word means. It just took me by surprise at being there. He added a solid corridor to the room's entrance, so it now is a fully enclosed room. It isn't quite a perfect rectangle. The rear right corner of the room extends a bit farther back than the rest of the room, and there's a kitchenette, counter, and sink in that right rear section. He's got 2 rows of theater recliners, the back row and a 10-inch riser, and all along he had subwoofer questions, since he wants truly excellent bass for all of his seats. Okay. So, looking at it here, I'm trying to see this. Wow, this has got so many things.
Lots of images, yeah.
Lots of images.
Yeah, don't worry too much about the diagram. That's just to show you. So there's a diagram where it's, I guess you could say it's very slightly L-shaped, but I mean,
it
really,
is basically a rectangle with there's a little bump out for the back.
It's like it's got a nose, you know? Like it just has a little bit in the back there. So in the little bit of the back, there's like a kitchenette, counter, and sink, and that's and an entrance back there to the bathroom.
Huge room, man.
It's a pretty big room. Yeah, it's not small nice at all, but very nice. And when we originally got these pictures, we're like, oh, hey, the opening to this room is just an opening, and he was worried about bass, so we're like, get a door in there, and he did. So that's fantastic. Solid core, external door, had that installed. Now his room is closed up. So
all right, currently he has one HSU VT-F15 Mark II that's on his front wall below his projection screen. There's actually storage space hidden behind his false wall up front, and the VT-F15H is nestled in that storage space. His second sub is an SVS PB13 Ultra, which is placed to the right of the front row of seats, acting as an end table. The local dealer is offering him a good price on a pair of SVS SB 4000 subs. He is considering replacing the 2 ported subs he has now with the 2 sealed SB 4000 subs. He knows that the 4000 series has a remote control in the app, but other than those convenience features, will there be any justification for making the swap? No.
I mean, it really isn't in this scenario.
I mean, you can no longer use it as an end table because it'll be too small, I think. There'll be that.
Plus, I mean, going from 2 big ported high output subs to, I mean, granted, the SB 4000s are no slouches, but they are sealed.
Yeah, I know,
so, I mean,
but
like
this
PB13.
room is not that huge, but it's quite big, but it's not huge.
Well, yeah, like if he said, I've got SB4000s and this is the room I'm using them in, do I need to worry? No, you don't need to worry.
But then again, you didn't need to worry to begin with because your other subs were doing just fine.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me tell you this. The reason to buy these subs is because they are physically smaller. Do you need physically smaller subs?
Right.
If the answer to that question is no, I do not, then you will get no difference other than placement. You know,
because this would actually be a downgrade in raw output capability.
Right.
I mean, maybe he was doing the whole thing. We talked about this, how, the sealed subs, according to the specs, can theoretically play a little bit lower because they don't have as steep a roll-off, but not in this instance. Like the PB13 Ultra, even with one port, so if you had no port plugs in it whatsoever, technically its -3 decibel point is higher than the SB4000s, but you have to remember the output that we're talking about is much higher to begin with.
Right.
So if you actually plug one port plug in the PB13 Ultra, it can now play just as low and louder than the SB4000. So you're not gaining any extension with the SB4000. And similar with the VTF-15H, that also has its variable tuning. You can plug one port on that to gain even deeper extension with linear output, and it would still be louder and just as low as an SB4000. So the only reason would be physical size. And it doesn't, I mean, he's got this little sort of cubby hole underneath of his screen up front where one sub is already living. So this is really just about if you're positioning that second sub, which is currently acting as an end table, if that's the thing you need to do and the one you have physically can't fit anywhere else, I guess. But if you were just like, oh, this is a good deal on SB4000s, should I snap it up? Like, no, not with the subs you already have. It makes no sense from a performance perspective.
So he says, regardless of which subwoofer model he ends up using, do we have any further thoughts on placement of the subs in order to yield further improvements? He spoke with Todd Welty at CEDIA and had a short email exchange with him. Todd strongly recommended putting two subs at the midpoints of the side walls, and he commented that in his investigations, diagonally opposite corners were not nearly as good as midpoints. Joe did specifically ask about getting the best seat-to-seat uniformity, though, since that is his goal. So what do we say? What will give him the improvement he's looking for? Yeah, I mean, you've got one at the front of the room in the smack dab basically middle of the front of the room.
Right. Yes.
So why not put the other one at the back of the room, smack dab in the middle of the back of the room?
Because that would be in the walkway behind his second row of seats that allows him to get to that kitchenette.
Right. So that's...
And to the bathroom. Probably more importantly to the bathroom. It blocks the walkway to the bathroom.
Yeah, therein lies the issue, right? So you've got the one at the front. How absolutely dedicated are you to having that sub in that front little cubby hole? Because if you're okay with moving it, then yes, the side walls or front mid wall placements are technically the most accurate.
They as far as seat to seat uniformity in a rectangular room, having them at the midpoint of opposite walls will give you the best uniformity results.
Yes.
Now, we talk about diagonally opposite corner placement very frequently because, first of all, it's often easier for people to place that because corners are often open in rooms and it's just physically easier to put them there. And it's a lot better to have them in diagonally opposite corners than both of them at the front or both of them at the back or something like that. Also, you do get boundary gain reinforcement. So you get it's almost like getting a little bit of extra output for free by having them in the corners. And Todd Welty will tell you directly, right? Having them not in the corners means that their output level is not quite as high. You're not getting as much boundary reinforcement as having them in the corners. And then in their own measurements and Harman's own measurements, the diagonally opposite corner placement actually in measurement looked a little bit better than what had been predicted in theory, although admittedly not as good as the midpoints of opposite walls. So absolutely correct. There's no disagreement here. If your top goal is uniformity from seat to seat, the midpoints of opposite walls is the thing to go for in a rectangular room. But I don't agree that diagonally opposite corners is like, it's trying to make it sound like it's bad. No, it's not bad. It's not as good.
Right. Totally. So the thing to understand about this room is that while there's a little jut out at the back for the kitchenette, the counter for the kitchenette actually goes into the room, and
a little bit, yeah.
It comes. It basically the second row of seats butts up against the counter.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. And then he's got a subwoofer in front of that next to his front row of seats. So that whole on what would be the walkway on the right side of the seats, there is no walkway there. That's blocked by the subwoofer being there and the counter being there.
Right. So the question is, can he fit one in the midpoint of the side wall?
Of the left wall.
On the left wall, right. So,
and that would be blocking his walkway, which is his only walkway to the front of the room. So I don't think he can, which is probably why he's done what he's done.
Yeah. So this may just be an instance where these are the locations. This is where I can put it. So, having somebody like Todd Welty or us tell you, well, you got to put it in the midpoint of the walls because that'll give you the best space. Well, you can't. And if you can't, then you can't.
You could sacrifice some seats so that your seating isn't as wide, and then you'd have a walkway, but I don't think that was the plan.
I don't think so either. I'm sure he's got all these seats for a reason. So, I mean...
But maybe he was thinking, again, back to the size thing. I don't know. Are SB4000s small enough that you could put them at the midpoints of the two side walls and have a walkway, or have one at the midpoint of your front wall and one at the midpoint of your back wall and still leave open that walkway to get behind your seats to the bathroom? If the SB4000s being physically smaller will allow you to do that, now, is that worth it? Yeah. That's highly questionable. So, I mean, what I would have you do, so you've got the placement you have, middle of the front wall and to the right of the seating. Now, that is not a physical placement that is the top recommendation of any of the theory or anything like that. What you would need to do with that current placement is trial and error, play with the phase of the subwoofer. Now, the one that is to the right of your seats, that's physically closer to you, so that's the one you probably want to play with the phase, and that's easy to do because it's a PB13 Ultra, which has fully variable phase. So you would probably need to do the trial and error process of playing with the phase knob on that PB13 Ultra. And unfortunately, if you're doing it by ear, it means you're playing the bass sweep on repeat. You make a little change to the phase knob on your PB13 Ultra, and then you have to go and sit in every one of your seats.
Take some Advil before you start this process.
And listen to that bass sweep and see how uniform it is. Then make a little change on the phase knob and go to every one of your seats and listen again until you find the most uniform response. That is a painstaking, slow, annoying process, but that would be what you would need to do with your current placement to get the optimal uniformity that you can with that placement.
I'm trying to figure out if he can do this because the subwoofer's on the right corner. It looks like it's blocking the counter being used. If it's kind of tucked underneath that counter over there, he says he's using it as an end table for the first row.
For the front row. Yeah, so I mean the front row is definitely in front of that counter. Right. So we don't see the sub in these pictures. In these pictures, he doesn't have the BB13 Ultra.
I thought he did in one of those. It looks like he did in one of those.
No, these were small pictures that I could find off of a forum that he linked to. So he doesn't actually have either of his current subs in any of these pictures. I should have explained that earlier. Yeah, they're not in there.
So if I'm just wondering if he's sitting more than halfway back into the room. Okay. If he's sitting more than halfway back into the room, and that sub is acting as a end table. Now, if he's sitting in the front half of the room and it's acting as a side table or whatever, well, then this doesn't work. But if he's sitting in the back third, which is kind of where we might want him to be, then the midpoint of the front wall would be in front of the front.
Oh, in front of the seats?
In front of the seats.
But the seats are these long chaise seats, so...
Yeah, you're gonna have to jump over that. You got that chaise seat.
That chaise jump over an SB4000.
Maybe I don't know.
Honestly, I wouldn't have you replacing the subs. I wouldn't necessarily have you changing your placement. I would have you playing with the phase knob. It's going to be annoying, but it sounds with everything else he's done. Doesn't this sound like a project he'd be willing to take on?
Maybe I would not do it by ear though. I would be using RoomEQ Wizard and just looking at the
How
graph.
is that really? That I mean, now you're moving the microphone and measuring. That actually takes even longer than just moving and listening.
It doesn't display in real time. You can't just look at it in real time.
That's when we talked about like having an iPad for each seat and one of the little microphones that plugs into the headphone jack.
Sure, that sounds cheaper. Let's buy an iPad for each seat.
Then you're still going around and looking at each one of them in turn. It's not that much faster.
All right. Karl noticed that Denon is advertising their new X4500H and X6500H receivers, as well as the flagship 8500H that already came out a while ago, will all be IMAX Enhanced. what is the AV receiver's role in the whole IMAX Enhanced program? Karl was under the impression that IMAX Enhanced is mostly about the content, retaining the IMAX aspect ratio. So what does the AV receiver have to do with it other than passing the signal through untouched? Okay, so IMAX Enhanced, from my understanding, is all about DTS:X, and then the content being certified by IMAX, mastered by IMAX, which means the AV receiver is like, technically I'm doing it.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm playing DTS:X. Yeah,
I'm good. I did my thing, and that's IMAX Enhanced. So, I mean, it's literally like, it's like advertising you have seatbelts in the car. Like, they all do it nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting... So, with the IMAX Enhanced program, let's start with the software itself. The movies themselves, those are going to be mastered by IMAX on the video side and DTS on the audio side. They're ensuring that it's mastered to their specifications, and out comes the disc. Or potentially in the future, the streaming version. But so far, they're focusing on discs. So, okay, that's fine. That's what that's got. And it's got a little flag in there that says, I am an IMAX Enhanced disc. Now, let's say you put that into a regular Ultra HD Blu-ray player in a non-IMAX Enhanced TV, which is every TV other than Sony's Master series right now.
Right.
Although that might change in the future, and we're expecting it to, especially from Samsung. But it's basically every TV is not IMAX Enhanced yet, and you play it on an AV receiver that is not IMAX Enhanced. What happens? Well, it still plays, and you still get HDR10, or if you have a Samsung TV, you'll actually get HDR10 Plus, and you still get DTS:X audio. All of it still works. Now, let's say you do have a Sony Master Series TV, so it is an IMAX Enhanced television. Well, it's supposed to see that little flag on the disc that says I'm an IMAX Enhanced disc, and it's supposed to go into IMAX Enhanced picture mode automatically. Now, the Sony Master Series has another similar thing, which is their Netflix calibrated mode, right? They're also the only TV that has this Netflix calibrated mode, but you open up Netflix and it automatically goes into Netflix calibrated mode. Well, over on HD TV Test, they looked at the Netflix calibrated mode and they're like, yeah, it's the cinema mode. It's the same as the cinema mode picture preset. It's just that the TV automatically goes into it when you open Netflix. And if you go in there and you manually turn off the Netflix calibrated mode, it bumps you back into the standard picture mode. So you see more of a difference. Right. That's what, and even if, so let's say you manually put your Sony Master Series TV into cinema picture mode and you go into Netflix and then you turn on the Netflix calibrated mode, or that automatically comes on, and then you manually turn Netflix calibrated mode off, it doesn't go back to cinema mode where you had put it before you did all of this. No, it bumps you back to standard picture mode. So once again, your eyes go, oh yeah, I definitely see a difference.
So what happens when you switch off of Netflix mode, off of Netflix onto something else? Does it stay in cinema mode, or does it go back to what you had before?
Then it goes back to whatever picture mode you were using.
That's stupid and irritating. So
IMAX Enhanced, as far as we know, because they've been pretty vague on a lot of this stuff, but as far as we know, it's a similar idea. There's going to be an IMAX Enhanced picture mode, but the idea is that the TV automatically goes into that when it detects an IMAX Enhanced disc. But it's just going to be the cinema mode. That's all it's going to be. But the thing is that I remember that whole thing with Christopher Nolan being like all upset that, out of the box, it's not the calibrated mode and it's got the smoothing, the soap opera effect on and that. This is basically to counteract that.
Right.
It's saying, okay, I'm playing an IMAX Enhanced disc. I'm going to go into a properly calibrated picture mode, but effectively it's no different than the cinema preset picture mode. It's just that it's doing it for you. The user doesn't have to think about it.
That's fine for all the people that don't listen to this podcast. Basically.
Exactly.
But that's great for them.
Who it's for.
But for us who have...
We just put it in cinema mode.
We have user modes that we may have, or calibrated modes. We don't want you switching us to the standard cinema mode. We want you to stay in the mode that we set this thing at.
Yeah.
But,
so that's the video side. Now the audio side, similar thing, right? Like we said, you plug an IMAX Enhanced disc into a AV receiver that is not IMAX Enhanced. It just plays DTS:X. No problem. Yeah. If it is a Denon or Marantz that does have the IMAX Enhanced certification, then it's going to go into IMAX Enhanced listening mode, which is DTS:X. But It's going to do the thing like it does with Dolby Vision, where if you've done any video output changes in the AV receiver, it's going to turn all those off because it's passing through the IMAX Enhanced video without any changes being applied to it by the AV receiver. So there's that side to it. And the one other thing, and this was interesting, this is something Gene Dalasallo over at Audioholics, he's been in contact with DTS and IMAX directly. Didn't get many more details, but he got one detail that he outlined in a video that he posted on Audioholics' YouTube channel, which is that they have specified for IMAX Enhanced that the center channel needs to be encoded as an object, not a channel. This is something they're requiring for IMAX Enhanced.
That's good.
Is that the center, what would have been the center channel, has to be encoded as an object. Why is that important? Well, because if you look in Denon and Marantz, in their settings and their audio settings submenu, they've got a thing in there that only applies to DTS-X, which is a dialogue level adjustment that you can do, which only works if it's encoded as an object. So this is something you're going to be able to do with IMAX Enhanced audio tracks, is use that DTS-X feature where you can independently change the volume of the dialogue separate from everything else because the dialogue has been encoded as an object. So that's a cool little tidbit. That's about it.
All right, Christian on Facebook. Christian has a Vizio P series TV that does 4K and HDR, but he has an older Sony receiver that does not support 4K. He got a Samsung Ultra HD Blu-ray player, so he uses its main HDMI output to send 4K HDR video directly to his TV, and its second audio-only HDMI output to send audio directly to a Sony receiver. And he's got lip sync issues, of course. And worst of all, the amount of lip sync discrepancy seems to be randomly different from disc to disc.
Let me tell
you something.
Sadly, does not shock me at all.
No, I have had similar issues where I've gone HDMI up to the TV and then optical to a, and this is with a Blu-ray player, to the speakers that I was using, because they were like computer speakers. And what I would have to do is pause the disc, and then, as it shifted from chapter to chapter, I would have to pause. It would sometimes the lip sync would get off. I'd pause the disc and then press play, and it would be fine.
It'd be back. Oh, that sounds like a smooth playback experience for your movie.
Try that. Okay, so he's thinking he'd like a Navy receiver upgrade, and he's got $500 to spend. His room is small, 10 by 12, and his speakers are all SVS Prime. So which $500 receiver will handle 4K HDR and have the ample power to drive his 5.1 speakers? Listen, any receiver can power prime elevation speakers.
Well, not even prime series speakers in a 10-foot by 12-foot room.
Anything.
Yeah, so wattage we're not worried about at
Accessories for Less has got for $499. They've got the X3400, which will which will do this perfectly.
It'll do that, and it'll give you the highest level of Audyssey Multi-Q XT32, which is tough to find at $500, but this can do it for you. So that's the runaway leader.
Right.
The only thing would be if you do want to do Atmos and you want to do more than 2 overhead speakers, so first of all, in a 10-foot by 12-foot room, 5.1, not 7.1.
Not 7. Yeah.
So that's great, which the X3400H has 7 amplifier channels and can power 7 speakers and can process 7 speakers maximum. So you could add 2 overhead speakers and do 5.1.2 Atmos in this room using the X3400H. If you super duper want to have 4 overhead speakers, that's the only thing that this could not do. The least expensive way you could do that would be with Onkyo's TX-NR787. Accessories for Less has that listed. Right now they're out of stock, but they'll get more. So they have that listed at $580. So we've gone over your $500 price point, but it is by far the least expensive receiver that can power all on its own 9 speakers. So you could do 5.1.4 with that one for $580, or you could spend $700 on Marantz's SR6012, which can also power 9 speakers all by itself, or you can even expand that one to do 11 speakers. You'd have to add a 2-channel amp to it later, but you'd never do that in a 10-foot by 12-foot room. But both of those more than $500, as long as you are okay with 5.1 or 5.1.2, but not 5.1.4, then the X3400H is the runaway winner for $500.
Chad Chad wants to install some in-ceiling speakers in the soffits of his room, but the soffits are actually attached to the side walls and they remain open at the top. So Chad really wants the in-ceiling speakers to be sealed. He's already considered on-ceiling speakers like the Focal Little Birds, but those didn't pass the spousal acceptance factor, SAF. So they've got to be in the soffits, but with sealed backs. He found Axiom sealed in-ceiling speakers, but at $275 each. They're kind of expensive. Monitor Audio has some sealed in-ceilings, but they're similarly expensive at $265 each. He looked into using Dynamat, Dynabox backer boxes, but those are kind of pricey too. I don't know how much those will cost, but
they're about $90 each.
Just for the boxer.
Each of the Dynamat. And just to explain, though, they are a handy thing. They're actually like a flexible like PVC thing with some foam that you go into them, so you can actually roll them up, stick them up into the hole you've cut into your ceiling. It'll unfold itself up there in the ceiling bay, and then you install your speaker in that, and it creates a backer box for any in-ceiling speakers, the Dynamat Dynabox. So it's a handy thing, but they are about $90 a piece.
Yeah. So, plus you prefer the easiest installation possible. So, just an in-ceiling speaker with a sealed back already attached is what he's looking for. The maximum distance from any of these in-ceiling speakers to the primary seat will be 10 feet. So, do we have any suggestions for him? So, the first thing I did is I looked at Outdoor Speaker Depot
because we like their in-ceiling speakers, the MK650s.
They do have a back box for one of their speakers, but it's
for the 70-volt commercial model, and it's
not very good.
Not much of a backer box. You can make something out of plasticine better than that, I think. So
right.
Yeah.
So I went over to Monoprice, and they have a backer box for their 8-inch one, which is I think.
And actually, the same thing is available for the 6.5-inch.
I couldn't find that one. Okay. So
right below the price of that one, there's an option to choose the 6.5-inch size instead of the 8-inch size. But either way, it's great. These go with their Caliber series in-ceiling speakers from Monoprice.
And I think the back boxes are like $20, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, very affordable from Monoprice. Very affordable. And the in-ceiling speakers from them are affordable too. They're under $100 a pair.
Yeah. So those were the options that I was looking at. What did you find, Rob?
So Monoprice does also have their Alpha series of in-ceiling speakers, and they have a metal back box that works with those. Okay. So that's another option from Monoprice.
I thought the metal back box was like $60 though, or something like that.
It's more expensive, and it doesn't have the clips built in, so it's actually meant more for like a track ceiling. It's meant more for like a drop tile ceiling. So, which is great because some people want to install in-ceiling speakers in a drop tile ceiling, and this gives them an easy way to do it from Monoprice. So, in your case, you'd probably go with the Caliber series and their plastic backer boxes, very affordable. Now, if you wanted a step up in speaker quality, the one I'd probably point you to is RBH. Right. Because RBH does sell full back cans with a very nice clip system that's all there. The speaker itself actually would wire to this back can, and then you run the speaker wires to the back of the back can, and it feeds that through to the speaker inside with clips already integrated into the back can itself. So that is a very simple installation. Those are meant to work with their Visage series of speakers. So the 6.5-inch Visage VA615, that does go for about $300 a pair. So it's
still less than $275 a pop.
Still less than $275 a pop. Although the backer boxes from RBH, or the back cans, they're not super cheap. I've found those for about $75 to $100 each. So you're starting to get right around $250 each again.
Those would be significantly better quality than the
they'd be better
Axioms
quality.
though, and or the Monoprices for that matter.
That's right. But you're back to the same sort of price point. So since he wasn't too keen on paying $250, $275 each, I'm thinking the Monoprices make more sense. I do still like Kef's in-ceiling speakers, but they've got kind of pricey, and their backer boxes are like boxes. They're not cans. They're full metal boxes meant to go in new construction. So those are probably out of the running. So I'm thinking the Monoprice makes the most sense by far.
All right. Tyler is building his first dedicated theater in his home in Alberta, Canada. The room is roughly 12 by 20 by 7.5. So it's basement probably, I guess.
It sounds like, especially with the next part.
But the exterior walls are unfinished right now, so we will have to frame and construct those, making the finished space a bit smaller.
But not a ton. What are you talking about?
Just the walls, though, right? I was going to say just the walls, not the ceiling, because you're taking the height off that ceiling, you have to duck to get in. I mean, not me, because I'm
Well, I mean, a 7-foot ceiling in a basement is very normal.
There's only one small window that he will black out, so there'll be totally light controlled, a totally light controlled dedicated theater room. He was thinking like a 10-foot distance from the screen to his primary row of seats. Would he have sufficient space for a second row of seats on the riser? 20 by what side are you sitting on? Because 10 feet is smack dab in the middle of that room, and for
well, it won't be quite, because it'll probably be 19 and a half or 19 feet long by the time he finishes that exterior
dude,
wall.
It's basically smack dab in the middle.
Basically in the middle of it.
So I would either cheat forward or cheat back on that. Just for I'll be honest. Okay, so a 19-foot room, yes, you can have 2 rows of seats.
Yes.
I think you definitely can have that. I don't think that you should put your first row of seats or your main row of seats smack dab in the middle of the room. Acoustically, that's not very good. But so you want to have a couple of feet behind your front row. So let's say he's 19 feet.
Okay, let's say the room is 19 feet long. Gotcha.
Right. So the couches are what, about 3 feet deep, 4 feet deep? Is that what we say on average? 4 feet deep, 3 feet deep.
Well, 3 feet deep without them being reclined.
Sure. Yeah, without them being reclined. So as they're sitting there. So we're going to come up a couple of feet. And so let's say 2 feet off your back wall is the back of your first couch.
Is the back row?
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 feet from the back wall to the back of the back row.
Right. And then there's going to be 3 feet for the couch itself. So you're now 5 feet into that room. And then you want to have a walkway so people can get in.
Another 3 feet.
Another 3 feet there. So you're 8 feet into the room. That's the beginning of your thing.
Beginning of the front row now.
Front row, right. And then there's 3 feet of that. So you're on to, you're basically sitting just south, just a little bit further away than the middle of the room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's basically moving him to 11 feet from the front wall.
Yeah.
Instead of 10 feet from the front wall. I mean, one question I have for you here, because he's saying the room is starting right now at 12 feet wide and it's going to get a little bit narrower because he's finishing one of those walls.
Dude, these couches are going to be tiny. Love seats.
Well, but, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having one side of the seats up against the side
Which
wall.
is what my theater has, because my theater is about 11 and a half feet wide.
Sure.
And
I mean, those won't be the optimal seats, but that's also not where you're going to be sitting the vast majority of the time. So, okay, somebody gets the not great seat that's up against the left or the right wall. I'm not worried about that, but I'm thinking screen size.
Right.
Is it possible he might want to use an acoustically transparent screen and have his speakers behind the screen, because that changes things now, right? That is basically either a false wall or a retractable screen that's coming down some distance in front of the physical front wall,
right.
Or is the screen going to be right up against that front wall?
Well, he does ask what size screen should he go for, and it's really that's really what it comes down to. I mean, this is new construction, so the sky's the limit as far as what you want to do. The cheapest thing to do is to get a fixed frame screen and throw it on the back wall, and then have your speakers go around it.
Yes. Now that could also work just fine. Because so let's go back to if he does keep a 10-foot seating distance,
right?
And we're going to assume you get a fixed frame screen that hangs right on your front wall. If you got a 110-inch diagonal screen size, 16 by 9, that's an 8-foot screen width. So from side to side, it's 8 feet wide.
Right.
That leaves you a little bit less than 2 feet on each side, because again, we're thinking the room's going to be 11 and a half feet wide by the time you finish it, something like that. So you got something a little bit less than 2 feet on either side. That's okay. You want to put some absorption on those side walls next to your front, left, and right speakers that are to either side of your screen. Your center speaker is going to be below the screen and angled up to aim at you, but all of that works out pretty okay. It does mean your seat ends up pretty much in the middle of this room, which acoustically is not ideal, but it gives you a nice 44-degree field of view. It leaves you about 9 feet behind your front row seats, which is completely adequate to have a second row of seats back there. So, I mean, that all kind of works out, other than your primary row is almost smack dab in the middle of the room. I mean, if it is 19 feet long, it's 10 feet from the front wall and 9 feet from the back wall. It's not actually smack in the middle. It's a little bit
close, though.
Little bit behind the middle.
Yeah.
But all of that kind of makes sense to me, because if you are going to end up doing false wall, then that false wall needs to be about 2 feet deep. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, if you keep the same 10-foot viewing distance, now you're only going to have 1 foot behind that back row, that's okay still. It's not the end of the world.
As long as you don't put reclining couches back there. Yeah.
Well, you have wall hugger design. 1 foot is adequate.
I guess that's true.
So if you're okay with only 1 foot behind your back row of seats, then you could actually do a false wall, a 2 foot deep false wall. All your speakers are now behind an acoustically transparent screen. I'd still recommend something like a 120-inch screen 10 feet away from that. Nice big 46.5-degree field of view. But that could work. Well, so that's the first two questions. So yeah, you decide. You want a little bit bigger, maybe false wall, acoustically transparent, but of course price goes up on all of that, right?
Right.
Acoustically transparent, more expensive. Building a false wall, a little bit of extra cost.
Yeah, yeah. So he's heard about making the seating riser serve double duty as a bass trap. Can we help him understand how that works? Well, basically what you want to do is you want to leave that, basically the riser to be somewhat open so that air can go through it. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And
you can have holes in it. You could have vents in it. You could have it raised up so that air can actually get underneath it.
Right.
But air into the internals of the riser somehow.
Then you want it to be overbuilt as far as construction-wise. You could build a riser with like 2 feet, between each one of the crossbars, stuff like that. No,
I do 16 inches.
You want to have them like.
Maybe
tighter.
Even 12 inches.
I would say 12 inches. Yeah. You want to have 12 inches, the bays in these things, so that when you're building this thing, it is very inert. And, lots of nails, lots of screws, whatever you put in there. And then you want to fill it with insulation. Pink insulation is just fine.
Oh, absolutely.
Just throw the cheapest insulation you got in there, fill it up to the top, and then make sure air can get in it. Therefore, it essentially becomes a bass trap. It's important that it can get air in there. And you're like, well, it's got air. How am I going to? Well, you can still cover it with carpet, except for where the vents are, or you could, wrap. You could cover the top with carpet, and then the sides you could wrap with
speaker grill cloth, basically
grill cloth in some of the locations. You would probably want to do it in the location where people's feet will not be. So the back, that sort of thing. That's how it works.
Yeah, as long as air can get into the internals of that riser, and then the riser is just got regular pink stuffed insulation in there, it's kind of working as a big old bass trap, because air can get in there, and it turns itself into heat once it does, and that is a bass trap.
So he says, is the room too short at 7.5 feet to worry about Atmos? No. He isn't fully sold in Atmos as it is, although he's hoping he can hear a good demo of it to help him decide if he wants it. Regardless, would we recommend starting with 5.2 or 7.2 in here? Okay, so those are two different questions. Sure, go to the movie theater, see if Atmos impresses you. I mean, I guess that's the best way to do it. You could go to a local custom installer and see if they've got a room that has Atmos in it with some sort of demo. You could try to check out. That's maybe something you could do. And
put on Jurassic Park, which is actually DTSX, but...
Yeah, whatever. Regardless, I would wire for Atmos since this is new construction. I would wire, you might as well.
Yeah, put the wires in the ceiling, because better to do it now while you're building the room than retrofit it later, for sure. Right. Speaker wire's cheap.
As far as 5.2 or 7.2 in here...
I mean, his front row is going to have a decent amount of space behind it to the back wall.
I guess it depends on how much you care about that back row. That's what it really comes down to for me. If the back row is not going to be used that often, or it's not that important to you, then sure, 7.2 is fine. It's great.
Well, I would lean towards it. Again, I would certainly wire for it, because, again, way easier to run the speaker wires when the walls haven't been constructed yet. So
right.
Without question, I would wire for it. I mean, the thing is, if you wire for 7.2, or actually 7.2.4, right? You wire for that, and then you just never use the surround backs or never use the ceiling speakers, or you give them a try and decide, I don't care, I'm going to return the speakers I bought to install here. Still no problem.
Right.
And you're out a little bit of money for the speaker wire, but it's way easier to wire for. So absolutely, wire for 7.2.4 ahead of time. You can decide later.
I mean, the room's certainly deep enough for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not being very helpful.
For sure.
It's almost lunchtime, and I'm starting to get I'm very hungry right now. I didn't eat breakfast.
Low blood sugar.
That's right. So he enjoys building stuff and has plenty of DIY experience, so he's strongly leaning towards building his own DIY speakers and subs. Most likely the Fusion 8 speakers from DIY Sound Group and a pair of Dayton Ultimax DIY subwoofers. Any opinions on those plans? Well, my opinion on the Fusion 8 speakers is that they don't offer them anymore.
They do not. You probably want to get the HTM series. Those are the most similar.
Yeah. So that's the first thing I looked up was that. I mean, if you want to build your own speakers, dude, knock yourself out. That is 100%. And especially if you're going to do a false wall, you don't have to finish the speakers. You could
There's another thing. Yeah. I mean, whatever money you were going to put into finishing the speakers, you could easily afford to build the stick framing and speaker grill cloth for a false wall.
Right.
So that's...
So
that's true. Yeah, just raw MDF.
You
cabinets.
literally have to finish one sub if you're going to do two subs which you should do. Finish the one sub that's going to be in the room with you.
Oh, there's okay. Yeah,
so I mean that's one of the upsides of that. If you're not going to do the false wall and everything else, I mean, you just have to. If it's something you want to do, then I mean, I'm not going to say no.
Oh no, I'm perfectly fine with these. They're probably more output than you actually need for this room size.
They're all, that's one only thing I don't like about the most of these DIY designs. They're all freaking horn-loaded.
Well, because they're going for the we can do something at a price point, the output level that you can't get from anything even close to this price point in a finished speaker, right? That's what they're going for. They want to wow people, and that's fair enough.
I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of horn-loaded speakers, but that's just me. So,
but it'll be easy to drive, man. You won't have to worry.
Won't have to worry about. Yeah, that's true. So yeah,
no, I mean, and they make. I mean, I've looked through the designs on DIY Sound Group, and they are perfectly reasonable designs. There's nothing in there that makes me go, "Oh, you should avoid that." No, they're perfectly reasonable designs if you're going to enjoy the project of building them. I mean. Some people are like, oh, why aren't you, Rob, more into it? And I'm like, because I don't have the time, I don't have the skill, I don't have the inclination, so I'm just going to buy finished stuff. And yes, I'm paying a higher price for it, admittedly, but you know what? I bought it, it arrived at my door, and I set it up. I didn't have to do anything else. It was fast and easy.
Okay,
and it works.
You know what? Talk to me in 10 years. In 10 years, my youngest son will be 19 and hopefully out of my house. And at that point, I might find myself interested in doing a little DIY. Until then, Rob doesn't have the space. Doesn't
or the time, or the inclination.
The time, or the inclination, or the tools, or any of that stuff, right? I have the space. I probably have technically the time if I made it. But I don't have the inclination, and I've got so many other responsibilities that it's just a nightmare to even consider such a thing. So, yeah, if this is something that you really love to do, knock yourself out. No, I'm not just talking to whoever we're talking to here. I forgot who we're talking to.
Tyler.
But just in general, DIY. People are like, why don't you guys talk more? I don't care because it's not what interests me. And guess what? There are whole forums of people who really want to talk about this. Talk to them. They'll talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that puts a little bee in my bonnet is when they're like, this is something that you can't get from anything at any price point. I'm like, no, that's silly. Or this is what I went with, so therefore not only is it just as good, it has to be psychologically better than anything else I could have bought. It's like, no, just be happy with the fact that you had a fun project and ended up with good stuff at a cost savings for sure. Probably wouldn't be a cost savings for me because I probably have to build them like 8 times and finish them 12 times to get something that looks reasonable because I don't have the skill. But if you do, it's going to be great.
They're not factoring in their time. That's exactly the thing. That's the thing that happens. That people are like, I only spent $60 on this speaker, and you could never get a speaker like this for $60. I'm like, how long did it take you to finish it? Oh, about 6 months. Are you kidding me? 6 months? It took you 6 months, and you don't think that that's a cost. That's part of this. I'm glad that you love them, and I'm glad that you enjoy it. And I'm sure they're just fine, but they're not $60 speakers. They're not $80 speakers. They're, it's like Rob was saying, for us, they're a lot more than the speakers I would buy from Ascend or SVS or anybody, because my time. The time I would have to put into making that speaker look like something I get from them, it costs infinity dollars because I would never get there. I will never get there.
For one opinion on when you do go down this DIY route, avoid the inclination to go crazy huge, crazy high output. You're in a 12 by 20 foot room. You don't need it. Go with this 6.5 inch bookshelf size speaker. Go with the 12 inch Ultimax DIY subwoofer, not the 15 or the 18, because so often people are like, oh, I got to go with the biggest one they got.
It's only $20 more. Yeah,
no,
shut up.
Let's be appropriate for your room size. The 6.5 inch bookshelf, the 12 inch subwoofer, those are the models you want to go for. Don't go nuts. That would be my one thing I'll say on that.
Lastly, he says, a Denon AV receiver, right? Any strong opinion on which model? I would go the 4400
or 4500, depending on.
Yeah, I would go at least that. First of all,
wait, because that one, buy that at the end because we know it's going to be there.
Receiver almost certainly should be the last thing you should buy in these things, and projectors are kind of the same way. Like especially if you're going like speakers, like you could get your speakers at any time. Like speaker changes, like Hyperion released their Varus 3s, and they're like, believe us, it's different. I'm like, nah. It's really not. We totally changed the crossover. I'm like, nah, I bet you really didn't. But okay, I'm like, I bet it sounds exactly the same. But okay, knock yourselves out, guys. So speakers, I like you. As soon as you find the ones you like, you should buy them. But if you're building a theater and you're doing all this work, when you're not ready to install, don't buy a projector. Don't buy a receiver, because changes can happen in pricing pretty quickly. And you might as well wait until the last minute, and that's when you get it.
Well, plus there's the, like, maybe in the meantime you do find a good Atmos demo, and you decide, this is 100% not for me. There's no way I'm going to do this. Well, at that point, you don't need a 4400H. You can get a 3400H for $500. Right? So that could change. Or maybe you're like, Atmos is totally for me, and there's no way I'm going to do anything less than 7.2.4. Well, and because it's a small room and maybe I don't want external amps and I also don't need them because I'm building very efficient speakers, well, maybe it ends up being the 6400H because that can power all 11 of the speakers by itself without an additional amplifier, right? So there could be some differences, so get your Atmos demo first. The AV receiver is something that you can absolutely buy later. You do not have to decide on that right now. No way.
Right. All right, that's going to be it for this week. So what you got, Rob? What's left?
Alrighty, so we still have on our list Steve H, Rob K, scrolling down past the pictures here, Jason G, who wrote to us on Facebook, Marty S, and I think that's it. That is everyone who is on our list.
All right. If you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. Lemuel and Chad went to www.avrant.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and left us a PayPal donation. And we have 74 patrons over at patreon.com. So thank you, Lemuel. Thank you, Chad. And thank you, patrons.
Yeah, Lemuel, Chad, thank you both very much for those donations over on the website, avrant.com, via PayPal, and patreon.com/avrantpodcast if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, $1 minimum. Woo! So thanks very much to our 74 patrons over there.
$12 a year to get this podcast.
$12 a year. I think it's a pretty good deal.
That's what I think. And we also want to thank Lemuel again for talking us up to Accessories for Less.
Yeah, Lemuel, thanks very much for mentioning us. We know Accessories for Less likes us, so that's good to keep that relationship on the positive side. So we appreciate that, and congrats on your Focal speaker purchase. I'm sure you're enjoying them.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.